We may be facing the greatest depression we have ever seen. The amount of unemployment claims today is it's shockingly ridiculous relative to recent history. Millions, potentially 3 million. There are now some projections saying we could reach 50% unemployment. And it's not the same as it was in the Great Depression. It's not like market factors contributed to this to an extent. It's that, well, it's a global disaster. We now have several states that have been listed as disaster areas, and the virus is causing a major disaster with hospitals being overrun. We're running out of protective gear and ventilators, and well, it's impacting the whole world. This means that people literally can't work. It's almost like a major storm just came out and just turned all of our businesses off. Let me show you this graph, and we're going to read this. This is one of the most shocking things I've ever seen. Take a look at this. An unprecedented rise in unemployment. Back in 2008, we saw a major spike. Just over 500,000 people, maybe like 700,000 people applied for unemployment, or that was the list. Okay, this was unemployment insurance claims by week. Where we are today is so much higher. It's absolutely insane compared to all the other recessions. 2.25 million projected uninsurance claims. So Vox writes, and I'm not a big fan of Vox right now, how the COVID-19 recession could become a depression. The coronavirus is a global economic catastrophe. The reason I'm reading this is because Donald Trump recently said, maybe we got to kickstart the economy again in about 15 days to see where we're at. This is why. An epic historical depression could be so much worse than the coronavirus. I honestly don't know, but it could be. We could be talking about hundreds of thousands of people losing their lives amidst a major depression, starvation, illnesses, no hospital equipment. It may be the same exact thing we would see with the virus. We just don't know. So perhaps there's a middle ground to protect the economy and make sure people are working. One of the ideas pitched is that young people or those who have already been exposed or recovered from the coronavirus go back to work, and we isolate those who are immunocompromised or older. Let's read from Vox. Quote, "This is an economic tsunami. Mark Zandi, chief economist at Moody's Analytics, told me. Social distancing is economic distancing. We are telling people to cease going to stores, to restaurants, to workplaces. We are insisting they stop supplying their labor, making their goods. To slow a pandemic, we are forcing a recession, perhaps a depression. It was common in 2008 to hear economists say that nothing had changed in the real economy. The U.S. still had just as many workers, factories, and machines. We hadn't lost any land or knowledge. There was no physical reason the economy was in crisis. The collapse in credit markets had changed economic behavior. Businesses were afraid to invest and hire, and families were afraid or unable to spend. What we had was an output gap, the difference between what the economy could produce and what it was producing. The solution to an output gap, particularly one caused by collapsing economic demand, is simple. Fill it with money. Invest in infrastructure projects, give families cash. If corporations and consumers won't spend, then the government should spend on their behalf, creating the economic demand necessary to push the economy back to normalcy. The mistake the U.S. made in '08 was not spending enough. We underestimated the size of the output gap and then passed a stimulus too small to fill it. When the Obama administration returned to Congress for more fiscal ammunition, Republicans refused, and the recovery limped rather than roared. This is recent history, and in ways both implicit and explicit, it's shadowing the immediate response to the crisis. But this is not 2008, when the economy was intact but the credit markets were frozen. The real economy is in shambles. Millions of workers are being forced to shelter in place, and the factories and machines they operate are lying quiet. We are losing the use of land and knowledge because the clusters of human beings necessary to build upon them could spread a deadly disease. As Jason Furman, who served as deputy director of the National Economic Council during the financial crisis, put it to me, this isn't a financial crisis where if you can stop the panic, you can unfreeze the economy. Here, there's a deadly germ out there and you don't want to go near it for your sake and your community's sake. There's only one equilibrium. It's economic inactivity until the danger passes. Quote, "We're about to see dizzying decline in economic activity," said Zandi, the Moody's economist. "There's no analog to it in the modern era. It's a shocking statement coming barely a decade after a global financial crisis that was, supposedly, our generation's great economic flood. But Zandy thinks what's coming now may prove much worse. Here's what people don't get. You can't just flick a switch. These businesses that have lost employees could recall many of them and say, hey, come back and work. But it kind of reminds me, and I'm going to be a little bit, bring some levity here for a second. Kind of reminds me of Avengers Endgame, right? The great snap. Half the people were wiped out and they carried on, but the economy was in shambles. What happens next? You can't just put these people back in different jobs. Many people have moved on. Many people have moved. Many people have already lost their apartments or left their apartments, gone back home. These changes might not be reversible. Some of them may be, some of them maybe not. The result then is the longer we delay, the more the damage becomes permanent. And a Great Depression could be substantially worse than the disease itself. Now, apparently Dr. Fauci is urging Trump and other White House officials not to lift the lockdowns, not to say get back to work, because the disease is still going to be really bad. And we've got to make sure we sit out for a certain amount of time. I don't know. An economic devastation may actually be worse, they say. There will be at least 4 waves of economic pain, each building on the last. Wave 1 is the sudden stop, the unexpected cessation of economic activity all across the country. A month ago, people were going to work, eating in restaurants, paying childcare workers, buying flights, planning car purchases, looking at new homes, growing workforces, holding conferences. Now, vast swaths of the country are sheltering in place, and much of the economy has simply stopped. On Friday, Goldman Sachs projected gross domestic product would fall at a 24% rate in the second quarter of the year. If you're used to looking at GDP numbers, I don't know how to convey how startling that forecast is. A decline of this magnitude would be nearly 2.5 times the size of the largest quarterly decline in the history of the modern GDP statistics they write. When the economy stops and GDP plummets, workers lose their jobs. That, Zandy said, is wave 2, and it's coming very quickly. It may already be here. Initial data suggests we're seeing a spike in unemployment claims so massive it makes the worst week of the Great Recession essentially disappear on a chart. Look at this. It lines up with 1980 because this is so massive. The third wave, according to Zandy, will be all these folks who've seen their nest egg wiped out. They thought they were set for retirement and they're not. They'll go into panic mode. The shattered stock market will be a disaster for those in or near retirement. They're watching wealth they worked their whole lives to build crumble in the space of weeks. They won't purchase that new car, buy that new house, plan that vacation. And unlike some of the direct economic stoppages, which will lift when the virus eases, their reticence to spend will slow economic growth long after the direct crisis ends. Wave 4, Zandy continues, will see businesses cut investment. Corporations that intended to open a new factory won't. Media organizations thinking of launching new publications will hold back. Businesses that meant to upgrade their office space in 2021 will decide they're fine where they are. Another engine of economic growth dead. All of that, Zandy said, is definitely going to happen. Indeed, it's already happening. But if the virus is brought under control in May and Congress passes enough stimulus, Zandy and other forecasters think powerful catch-up growth in the third and fourth quarters is possible. Perhaps this could be V-shaped, a sharp drop followed by a swift recovery. And there's the important point. If we can get this back running by the third quarter, then, well, for one, that'd be really great for Trump. Perhaps Trump is wrong about stopping after 15 days because that could prolong the economic problems. It could cause another wave and another lockdown. Perhaps the answer is we wait 2 months. So we're looking at May. Then we kick things into high gear because we've come out on the other side clean. The virus is now mostly gone. There may be another wave after November, but then we start ramping up economic development with a major stimulus package. Perhaps that's the plan. Panic will be our greatest downfall, as I always say. If right now we are seeing panic, and I think we are, even at the government, Democrats fighting Republicans, stimulus packages, people at home worried about what's going to happen next, that will make everything worse for us. We need to be calm and rational and think this through. The risk, if we don't do this right, is a major Great Depression. The next generation's Great Depression, about 100 years just after the last one. And that's kind of crazy, isn't it? We see the pandemic with the 1918 Spanish flu, and now we're seeing a major economic downturn. Perhaps they're intertwined. So I don't know who's right. I don't know who's wrong. A lot of people are dragging Trump. Dr. Fauci is saying not to lift this, but maybe the 2-month thing is what makes sense. Otherwise, you'll risk, as one Trump supporter put it on Twitter, if Trump lifts this too soon, then Joe Biden and the Democrats will run ad after ad showing older people on ventilators. And that will be devastating for Trump and the election. If we wait this out, I don't think anyone's going to blame the president for an act of nature. Perhaps the smart thing is not to lift this. I'll leave it there. Next segment will be coming up tomorrow at 10 a.m. Thanks for hanging out. I'll see you all then.